Hello everyone, Lone Wolf here, and welcome to the Week 1 episode for the Harvest in 3.11 Challenge League. Strap yourselves in, because this one's going to be a long one. As per usual, for viewers that prefer an audio-only version of the Chaos Report, you'll be able to find it over on my Patreon for free. You will be able to find a link to the voice-only version as well as the text release in the description down below once it has been completed and uploaded. The audio-only version should be available immediately upon release. A quick reminder, you can also find the timestamps to each section in the pinned comment down below, as well as in the digital timestamps on top of the video timeline and in the description as well. Do keep in mind that this entire video is based on educated guesses or predictions, and as such they might not be entirely accurate. Furthermore, I might miss a thing or two that seem obvious to many, and for that I apologize. It's hard to cover everything after all. If I do miss something you think is important, leave it in the comments down below, and what that means of course is that you should always invest at your own risk. And with the usual disclaimer right out of the way, let's jump in. The first segment breaks down currencies and commodities, such as influence, exalted orbs, and fragments. I'll be giving my rough predictions for how the existing currencies will play out during the next week. Exalted orbs are first, as always. The OG Exalted Orb has seen an absolute explosion in price this first week. I mentioned how the Exalted Orbs could see a bit of a turbulent league with Harvest, but I was not expecting them to be absolutely smash every record they've previously had. They're currently sitting at around 175 chaos, but have already seen a peak of 190 at the end of the first week. It's on a small decline for the moment, but I wouldn't expect this decline to be extremely substantial, as the league mechanic itself does not provide a lot of additional Exalted Orb drops, but heavily devalues chaos as a whole, due to the free Reforge crafts that players would normally use hundreds of chaos orbs to achieve. I would imagine the patch coming in later this week is going to heavily affect the prices for Exalted Orbs, so keep a close eye on the potential patch notes. If access to the Exalted and the Null plus Exalted crafts in the Harvest League increases, you can expect them to drop accordingly. They'll likely remain above 140 chaos for the vast majority of the league, simply due to chaos being so heavily disvalued due to the crafting mechanic as a whole, that Exalts will not really be able to drop into more manageable areas. Additionally, Exalted Orbs are also used for a lot of metacrafting mods and slams that cannot be done by the current league mechanic. So with a lower supply, due to no extra drop quantity in every map, chaos being heavily devalued, and a comparatively increased demand compared to previous leagues, Exalts are at an all-time high. I would advise care when trying to invest into Exalted Orbs this league, as the market for them is extremely unpredictable in the current economic climate. As for the Influence Exalted Orbs and the Awakener Orb, let's take a look. The Hunter's Exalted Orb follow our predictions fairly closely, rising up critically to a high plateau that it currently still resides on. A small fluctuation is to be expected around 50 chaos or so for the next little while, as more players start crafting and start getting into the higher tier mapping process. They're currently sitting at an absurdly high 525 chaos, as they're frequently used to create perfect Tailwind boots at the current moment, by using the Harvest crafting mechanic. As the Tailwind mod is the only critical tack modifier on Hunter Influence boots, it is guaranteed to be slammed with the Harvest craft, and as a result, the Exalted Orb has seen a huge price increase. Similarly affected by the Chaos Orb low value, it further increased the prices overall. I would expect these orbs to stay extremely expensive throughout the league, barring any changes to the crafting mechanic as a whole. As a result, if you get one of these, check the weekly prices for Hunter Exalts and consider if it's worth selling, or using it to make your own Tailwind boots. The Awakener Orb has followed the predictions from last week's episode to the letter. It is currently sitting at around 500 and 525 chaos, which is pretty much the exact value predicted based on last league's value, and the slight increase in demand due to the need for additional double influence spaces. This orb is also part of the current Tailwind Boots craze, as you can also guarantee an elusive slam by using the same critical tack Slamcraft from Harvest that you'd use for the Tailwind mod as well. As a result, simply having a Redeemer/Hunter boot and slamming the crit mod twice will always result in a Tailwind plus elusive boot that can then be improved upon or finished up through whatever other crafting methods you prefer. They are likely going to stay fairly pricey as well, similar to the Hunter's Exalted Orb, so expect the prices to fluctuate, but stick around the current price point of 450 to 550 chaos for a while. Once more players get their Awakening level 8 Atlas set up, I would expect the prices to slowly dip, as more and more supply will become available for these. The Crusader's Exalted Orb has been sitting at around 450 chaos for a while now, and seems to simply stick around this area for a few dips and drops here or there. The mods provided by it are very popular for a variety of builds, so I'd imagine the demand to not drastically decline anytime soon, With many players also picking up physical-based abilities, the always popular Explosion mod has also been in fairly high demand. The harvest crafting also affects this pricing a bit, as it's quite easy to acquire a lot of the desired mods of this influence in specific, using very common crafting options provided by the seeds. Expect the prices for this one to stick around this area for a while, as long as the patch does not influence crafting or make the influence craft seeds more common, of course. The Warlord's Exalted Orb has seen a fairly rocky time in this league overall. It started off fairly high, like all the other Exalted Orbs, but it's slowly but surely rocked its way towards the 400 Chaos price point. It currently sits at 438 Chaos as of writing this part of the script, but is expected to reach the below 400 Chaos mark in the following days. We're likely going to see it dip farther and farther as the league goes on, due to the many starter builds being large fans of the mod pool, while more advanced builds that are created later down the line in any given league are normally a bit less reliant on the mods from this particular influence type. Lastly, the Redeemer's Exalted Orb. As always, this orb is the least popular of all the Exalts. It is currently sharing its price with the OG Exalt at around 175 Chaos after a drastic decline from the previous few days. While the elusive mod for boots is very popular, the rest of the Influences portfolio of different mods is not exactly something that most players look for in their high investment items. The new mods and skills added by GGG have also not changed this dynamic a great deal, which leads to the Redeemer's Orb being the least popular one in this league as well. As a result, these orbs are likely not going to see a major change in their usual league cycle, meaning they'll stay roughly around the OG Exalted Orb prices with a slightly higher average price per orb. I would imagine these orbs to be at around 10 to 20% more expensive than OG Exalts once the market stabilizes itself a bit more. As always, if you intend on buying any of these orbs just covered, make sure to keep an eye on this extremely volatile market. Especially pay close attention to the patch notes that will be released fairly soon for the upcoming Harvest League hotfix, which will likely bring with it changes that could affect the quantity of items dropped, currencies provided, or Exalt-like crafts becoming more common. Alteration orbs have completely skirted my predictions and done the complete opposite. They are currently sitting at a comfortable 1 to 10 Chaos ratio, which is a better ratio than any league I've previously covered on the Chaos Report. They are slowly starting to climb, likely in anticipation of next week's cluster jewel changes, as well as in general to create higher tier items, and are likely going to hit a 6 or 7 to 1 by the next episode, but they are nowhere near where I anticipated them to be at this point. The reason for this is fairly simple. I have misread the announcements from GGG and the teasers we got regarding the Harvest League as a more target crafting oriented one than a chaos spammy one. I was expected to see a lot less chaos reroll crafts than we have gotten in the actual league mechanic, which tainted my predictions for the alteration orbs. Since everyone can basically chaos spam their items an indefinite amount of times with no effort whatsoever, the alteration orbs, which are used to guarantee specific high rolled mods, just aren't as useful anymore to the common player that just wants to craft a bit on the gear every once in a while. Alteration orbs have, of course, lost none of their value in terms of being the best crafting method to guarantee 1 or 2 specific rolls, but they definitely have taken a hit in their overall demand. Additionally, Chaos Orbs being devalued as a whole means that the alteration to Chaos ratio is also a bit more skewed than you'd normally expect. Expect these orbs to slowly rise towards a 6 or 7 to 1 ratio as mentioned earlier during the next week. For this one, you also want to keep an eye on the patch notes, as their demand will increase if more exalted style crafts are available. The less Chaos Span is available and needed, the more alteration crafting will be done, and as such, the more alterations will be used. Last on our list of currencies, as always, the Ancient Orbs. I don't want to toot my own horn here, but we were bang on with our predictions for this league. As a result of the Headhunter nerfs and the overall league mechanics scaling very little with the item in particular, the prices of Ancient Orbs have seen about a 25% dip from the usual league prices. They're sitting at around 30 Chaos, which is exactly what we had predicted for the entirety of this league, and will likely continue to stick around this point at average. The prices are currently on a slight rise at around 32 Chaos, but they're extremely unlikely to hit the 40 Chaos areas throughout this league, barring any unforeseen circumstances like bugs or other abuses or content creators making builds with it, etc, etc. We will check back with this one next week, but if it stays around the area we predicted again, we'll likely drop it from the list. Moving on to the commodity section, we'll be covering the different fragment pieces as well as the synthesis and guardian map drops as always. The Simulacrum fragments will also be covered in this section from now on, to keep an eye on the development throughout the league. Shaper fragments have, for the first time ever, dropped below the prices of their Elder-style brothers. As we predicted, the heavy-handed nerfs to everything Shaper related over the past couple of leagues, and especially the Starforge nerfs for this particular one, have broken the loot tables back. This resulted in a vastly lowered interest in people wanting to fight the Shaper as a whole. The fragments are currently going for about 19 to 23 chaos, averaging out to around like 20 chaos a piece, for a whole set going for just around 80 chaos. Currently, every Uber Elder fragment dropped by the Shaper is worth more than the entry price to the fight itself. But there's still very little demand for the Shaper uniques as a whole, resulting in a very weird scenario where you can gain guaranteed profit by running Shaper, but still not wanting to, simply because the time investment is likely not going to be worth it. The jackpot drop here is still the Starforge, which is currently sitting at around 1.7x but is rapidly falling lower and lower. With it being an extremely rare drop, however, many players are simply following more profitable endeavors. My recommendation? Sell your fragments, unless you have absolutely no other choice or feel extremely lucky. The time invested into the Shaper fight is simply not worth it, compared to even just running maps. Dropping 1 or 2 tier 15 plus maps will make you twice as much money as the entire Shaper drop table will likely do, unless you get the Starforge or the Flask, which is very unlikely. The Uber fragments are also at a fairly low price, as a direct result of the Shaper fragments being so cheap to acquire. The Elder fragments cost about 35 chaos each, and the Shaper ones go for about 80. Thus, a whole set will run you about like 250 chaos, which is one of the lowest entry prices we've ever had for Uber Elder boss fights. The loot table is fairly decent, for this league in particular, as the Eternity Shroud is a very popular chess piece at the current moment. Additionally, 3 Mod Watcher's Eyes are always worth multiple Exalted Orbs if sold unidentified, and make up a large bulk of the profit you can make with each Uber Elder. With Exalted Orbs being so expensive, Chaos Orb-wise, it could be highly profitable to simply buy up Uber Elder sets in Chaos, then hoping for some decent drops and selling them in Exalted Orbs, as a single Exalted Orb will nearly pay for the entire run. 3 Mod Watcher's Eyes are currently going for about 5.5 Exalted Orbs, or an equivalent of about 1000 Chaos, or about 4 runs. For boss killers, this is definitely a worthwhile endeavor, I would argue, as long as you're lucky. We're likely going to see the prices slowly increase for the sets and drop for the loot, as more and more players will get access to Elder and Shaper as a whole, as they progress their Atlas, making the fight itself more accessible across the board. The Elder fragments have seen their best league ever, comparatively to the Shaper ones, as mentioned earlier. They're currently sitting at around 20 to 31 chaos, making the entire set cost about 100 chaos total. The main drop from Elder is still the 2 Mod Watcher's Eye, as the other uniques provided don't really offer the current meta builds much. However, the Chaos version of the Impresence, as well as the physical version, are still fairly alright in terms of value, so you're not entirely bound to a singular item's worth if you intend on farming this one. I would recommend running them, to be entirely honest, simply for the chance to gain a Watcher's Eye drop, which could kickstart a lot of your currency gains. About 100 chaos per set is really not that much to lose if you naturally accrue them over time. I would advise against buying sets though, for obvious reasons. The Synthesis unique maps have fallen by about 30 chaos since its last league price point. They're currently sitting at around 40 to 50 chaos, but are slowly and steadily rising. Due to a nerf to the unique rings they drop, which was their primary source of income, the overall demand for them has decreased drastically. They're still extremely worthwhile to run, in my personal opinion, as the Synthesis map modifiers can provide a large amount of value if you get lucky with the right ones, and the rings usually do still make back the money you spend on the map or would gain from selling it. There are also still jackpot rings that you can get filthy rich with, but the chance to acquire one has drastically been lowered as a result of the 3.11 nerfs, of course. The Cortex, on the other hand, is as expensive as it always was, currently sitting at around 1.6 Exalted Orbs, or about 300 chaos total. It still provides one of the best boss loot tables in the game, with the Maloney's Mechanism and the Bottle Faith, as they are still extremely popular and expensive uniques. Akin to the Synthesis maps, this one will likely see a rise in prices as the league goes on, similar to previous leagues, so consider buying them early or simply not running them later on. Lastly, our newest addition to this segment, the Simulacrum Splinters and the Fragments itself. Currently, the Splinters are sticking around a 1.1 to 1.5 chaos ratio per splinter, resulting in a bought fragment price of about 405 chaos. The fragment itself is sitting at around 440 chaos for the convenience of not having to buy 300 individual splinters. Overall, this is an extremely expensive fragment, and should be handled with great care, as you don't want to start a simulacrum you can't finish, at a price point of about 2 to 3 exalts each. That said, the simulacrum itself is currently likely to be the most profitable endeavor in the entire game when it comes to raw currency drops or wealth acquisition as a whole. As we've shown last week with a simulacrum episode, the drop rate on high value items, currency and fragments inside the simulacrum is unrivaled by any other league mechanic. If you can afford it and manage to beat it reliably, I would imagine running the simulacrum could be extremely profitable at the current moment. For most players, however, selling the splinters in moderately large stack sizes such as 30 plus would result in better options. With the currencies and commodities covered, let's move on to a unique item watchlist. First up on the list, the Kintsugi. As predicted, it has seen a rather large increase in popularity, resulting in a 6-link version of it running at about 4 exalted orbs at the current moment. This, however, is likely an inflated price, as I would imagine the prices to be more around the 4 to 500 chaos range, but we'll see how it continues onwards in the next episode, but I would not recommend buying them at the current moment. They seem overpriced. The increase in popularity is due to the addition of the Wind Dancer keystone on the passive tree, which allowed many builds to easily and effortlessly pick up the very popular combination of the keystone and the chest armor without having to sacrifice much at all in terms of passive points or keystones. We will likely see an increased decline of the prices, however, as there is nothing stopping an influx of them to flood the market, as they're not exactly the rarest unique in the game. The Surrender unique shield is up next on the list and has followed our predictions as well. It is currently among the most popular unique items in the entire game, resulting in an extremely high price of about 6 exalted orbs, or a little over 1.1 thousand chaos. You can acquire this one by way of the Ulnitol Breachstone boss encounter. The Breachstones themselves are currently costing about 52 chaos, which is actually fairly cheap, considering a singular one of those shield drops will net you around 21 times the cost of entry. Might be worth considering, while the prices for the shield are still high, of course. They are likely going to fall in the next little while, as more and more players start providing the supply for the shield in the market, and as the Breachstones themselves simply are not really hard to acquire. Last on the current list of the unique is the unique jewel One with Nothing. As we had covered in the previous episode, this one has seen an extreme rise in popularity throughout much of last league. With the addition of the new slam skills and making more skills available to be used with it, as well as nerfs to the facebreaker gloves, this jewel has seen an absolute explosion in terms of prices early on. It reached a peak of about 906 chaos a few days ago, but has seen a rather steady decline over the past following days, which is likely going to continue until the 500 to 550 chaos price point, at which point we can expect a short plateau. The best way to farm this one is still the Simulacrum encounter. Simply buy up splinters or the finished fragments and go ham. This adds to the entire great loot table situation I mentioned earlier with the Simulacrum. It's really profitable at the moment, for people that can run it. Now, moving on to our third segment for this video, the meta analysis. We predicted that the newly announced Melee League was going to be the usual spiel from GGG in our last episode. Announce melee buffs, actually end up nerfing a large portion of melee builds in the process, buff a few other parts to make them remotely viable, and also, of course we can't forget that, buff the hell out of casters and summoners because they clearly need it. As a result, melee characters seem to be around the 5th to 6th most popular archetype in the current league, as I predicted in the last episode. Necromancers, on the other hand, are as always leading the pack, with a staggering 28% play rate, as they're still the easiest and most brain dead. Get it? Cause zombies eat brains? Built to play in the game and especially powerful at the beginning of a league due to the extremely low equipment requirements. Directly following are ED Contagion Tricksters and a myriad of different mining builds, with Ball Lightning being the skill of choice for about 80% of them. Tricksters are sitting at 12% and the Saboteurs are sitting happily at their 11% for the moment. One last thing I want to point out is that the 8% Gladiator representation here is not actually a melee heavy one. Gladiators are mostly used for bleed bow builds at this point, which is why they're so high in the rankings in this league, as getting bleed based items is fairly trivial with the Harvest League mechanic. I expect more and more melees to drop off the ladder as the ladder progresses into the higher level areas, due to the slow playstyle of two-handed weapons leading to more deaths, and GGG also nerfing a large amount of defensive abilities for melees in the process of the 3.11 patch, such as Val Molten Shell, which was one of the only real defensive options to stay alive with when you had to get in close and personal. All of this combined will likely lead to melees having a higher death count, meaning less experience to get to the higher level areas. And as a result, expect more and more casters and summoners to show up over the course of the league, and more melee archetypes to disappear from the ladder entirely. As for the Atlas predictions, I currently don't have a lot to report here. I would advise focusing on maps that are quick to run to get a lot of seeds, or simply go with the usual great maps to run list. A few maps in particular to look at that look extra juicy with the Exalt prices right now are Alleyways, Arcade, and Precinct. I had to do a lot of research and experimentation on the harvest crafting for the following strategy segment, so I did not have enough time to really invest myself into researching the Atlas and figuring out what maps are the absolute best to run. This is just my personal opinion on the matter as of right now. I'll update you in the next episode with hopefully a more complete rundown. I apologize for this. Now, with the meta and analysis predictions finished, let's move on to what you've all been waiting for, the strategy and discussion segment. I'll be covering the basics of harvest crafting here, providing a useful spreadsheet and showing some examples of more advanced crafts. Now, by this point, everyone should have set up a basic garden with a few plots, some storage tanks, and potentially a horde crafting station or two. Which particular setup you chose is not really important as long as you're able to grow everything you intend on growing. In the background, you will see a quick run through of my garden. I will not be providing a layout for it, as the specific layout doesn't really matter. It's more about giving you a general idea of where things could be placed, so that you might be able to adjust whatever layout you already have towards a more efficient version. That said, however, I would recommend a garden layout that emphasizes storage space in T1 seed plots, as many as possible, over a layout that favors aesthetics or higher tier plots. With the 3.11.1f changes, higher tier maps, and especially tier 16s, are dropping an absolute ton of seeds. From my own experience, you will require about 4 to 5 tier 1 plots of each color to not end up sitting on seeds before the first ones are fully grown. You won't fill up all 15 plots at the same time, of course, but if you run into a bad RNG streak and end up getting the same colored seeds multiple times in a row, you'll require at least 4 to 5 of the same colored plots. As such, have them at least in your seed storage to switch out colors whenever needed, so you aren't wasting any growth cycles if you aren't willing to redo your garden with about 15 T1 plots in mind. The colors of each seed correspond to the crafts and are divided into 3 categories for each tier, representing their appearance rate. First are, of course, the common seeds. These will be what you will find most of the time when planting any colored seed. Then there are uncommon seeds, out of which you'll usually find a few in each full plot that you harvest of any given color. Lastly, there's the rare seeds. These will only show up every once in a while, and you should do your best to use these crafts they provide to their absolute best potential or save them for later, as you won't get them very often. Yellow seeds come with the following crafting options: life and attack related crafts as the common ones, socket change related crafts as the uncommon options, and cold and speed related crafts as the rare options. Purple seeds have the following options: caster and physical related crafts as the common, socket change related crafts as the uncommon, and fire and currency related crafts as the rare ones. Lastly, blue seeds have the following inclinations: defense and lightning related crafts are the common options here, link change related crafts are the uncommons, and chaos and unique item related crafts are the rare options. Those of course only cover the tier 1s, but to be entirely honest, most players will not require a specific breakdown of tier 2 and higher, as the frequency that you acquire those with is so low that you're likely going to simply plant every tier 2 and up seed that you get anyway, so specifying which one is rare and which one isn't, outside of giving you the names of the absolute best seeds to sell, which I'll do later on in this segment, does not seem like a good use of our time in this video. Just be aware that each tier of seeds gets progressively rarer as a result of only being dropped by the lower counterparts. You require fully grown tier 1s to drop tier 2s, fully grown tier 2s to drop tier 3s, and of course fully grown tier 3s to drop tier 4s. As a result, simply double check the list provided later to make sure you're not willy-nilly planting extremely profitable seeds and using them for fun when there's a profit to be made. Outside of those specific ones, just go ahead and experiment with them. Have fun, craft some items, like make some profits with the craft, or just slurp them up for juice for better seeds later on, or better crafts, or whatever. Just enjoy the league. Now, moving on to the actual specific of the crafts here, here's a quick rundown on what each keyword will actually do to your items. Firstly, randomize. This is a divine equivalent craft for all the specific mods with a descriptor given. Here's an example. Randomize the numeric values of the random physical modifiers on a magic or rare item from the purple tier 1 Wild Hellion. This will reroll every value of the mods on your item with the physical tag. Reforge. This is a Chaos Orb equivalent craft for the entire item. Here's an example. Reforge a rare item with new random modifiers, including a caster modifier, from the purple tier 1 Wild Ursuling. This will reroll the entire item, but guarantee at least one mod with the caster tag. Remove. This is an annulment orb equivalent craft for one random mod with a given descriptor on your item. One example, remove a random life modifier from an item. From the yellow tier 1 Vivid Wheater, will remove one random mod with the life tag. Augment. This is an Exalted Orb equivalent craft for one random mod with the given descriptor. Here's an example. Augment an item with a new Chaos modifier from the blue tier 1 Primal Maw. This will add one random mod with the Chaos tag to your item. Lastly, remove and add. This is a combination of remove and augment. As such, it's an annulment plus Exalted Orb equivalent craft for one random mod with the given description on your item. One example, remove a random non-lightning modifier from an item and add a new lightning modifier from the blue tier 1 Primal Dust Spitter. We'll first get rid of any mod on the item that does not have a lightning tag. Then it will add a mod with the lightning tag. This means that you cannot block suffixes or prefixes simply by filling them up with random mods. You would have to fill either the prefixes or suffixes with 3 mods that each have the lightning tag, in order to force this one to choose a suffix or prefix, respectively. Now, with the basics of the keywords covered, you will likely have started to already get a rough idea for just how powerful this crafting can be when applied properly. Outside of simply being able to essentially fossil or chaos spam items a near indefinite number of times, you can, for the first time ever in PoE's history, annul and exalt targeted crafts. If you've been browsing Reddit for the last few days, you'll have seen some absolutely insane items popping up, with literally all tier 1 best possible rolls and best possible mods on any given item. This is due to the ability to use and combine these new crafts in order to create entirely new crafting ways. Here's one example of such a crafting way. Let's assume you have a wand, like this one shown on the right. We're looking at some pretty decent stats overall, and with any other league, outside of the double-wheeled craft, a lucky annul, a raw exalt slam, or like simply bench crafting it, our options would not only be fairly limited to improve this wand, but also be entirely irrelevant, as players would never consider investing so much work and currency into a wand with an item level of 73, right? However, Harvest League changes this in a big way, through 2 specific limitations that are applied to each craft. Firstly, any given craft can only be used on items that are at most 10 levels higher. This means that this wand can be crafted with any seed that is higher than level 63, but no seeds that are below that item level. As such, a large hurdle of using currencies on these types of lower level items is gone. Where you would save your exalt and annulls for the absolute best of the best, these crafts cannot be saved for higher level items due to this restriction. The second part is that crafts are, unless you have a near infinite amount of hoarder crafting stations of course, time limited to the one instance that you harvested the seeds in, meaning you will have to use it immediately on something. These 2 aspects combined to make for some very fun and interesting choices that would normally never occur in the crafts, if the crafts were simple currencies that could be used freely, such as an exalt or an annul. Now, getting back to the wand, of course, let's say we wanted to change the critical strike chance, as the tier 4 roll is really nothing to write home about or really needed for any build. We have a few different choices for crafts in order to make this happen. Firstly, we could simply remove the mod with the corresponding critical tag craft. We could remove it with a non-XYZ tag craft, like the lightning one mentioned earlier, though this one would be obviously more risky as there are other mods on the item. Or we could simply decide to replace it with a different version of itself or any other critical tag craft using the remove and add key-worded craft of the critical tag assortment. This particular one mention comes from a blue tier 2 grain by the name of Primal Viper. It is one of the most expensive and rare ones out there, so should not be used without proper forethought, especially as it's also a tier 2 and used in a very, very powerful craft that I'll mention in just a bit. However, for our purposes, we're going to assume we want to make this one the best it can be, and we are just not going to care about the profit here. As such, we'll use the craft that reads as follows. Remove a random critical modifier from an item and add a new critical modifier. If you remember me mentioning it earlier, it will first remove the mod that exists and then choose any mod of that particular modifier type. As a result, you can use these particular crafting options to simply reroll the tier of a given mod if it's the only mod of its kind a given item can receive. This one, however, can receive another critical tag modifier, the critical strike multiplier suffix, which we have hit with our craft as shown on the right. With this one simple crafting operation, we've now changed the mediocre one that had a pretty subpar critical strike chance suffix into a vastly superior one, featuring a critical strike multiplier suffix instead. This method can also be used to reroll resistance tiers, life tiers, energy shield tiers, physical damage tiers, etc, etc. The list goes on near indefinitely, for as many crafting tag types as there are in the Harvest League mechanic. One further use of this particular type of craft, the remove and add keyword, is that you can simply use the crafting bench to craft any given mod with such a tag onto an item that does not already have such a tagged mod, in order to essentially then exalt a mod of that type onto the item. By removing the crafted modifier and adding an entirely new one through the remove and add keyworded craft. Through this combination, and many others, which would be way too plentiful to explain in this video, trust me, it is possible to achieve crafts that were previously absolutely unimaginable. If you need some inspiration for crafts, simply head on over to the subreddit of Path of Exile and check out the item showcase tag, and just look around at the posts from the last day or two. There's plenty of insane examples of the entire crafting system being applied, resulting in previous mirror tier items left and right, just 1 week into the league. Now, there are two further things I want to cover before ending this very brief discussion of the crafting system. Firstly, I want to provide a quick list of seeds that you should look out for, as they're potentially valuable and likely more worthwhile to sell than to plant yourself, unless you know exactly what you're doing, of course. Keep in mind that for these seeds to be as worthwhile as possible, you want at least eye level 75 versions of the seeds, at least most of them, to make it possible for their crafts on eye level 85 items and lower, because of the plus 10 modifier. Primal Maw Seed. This is a blue tier 1. Primal Viper Grain, that I mentioned earlier, which is a blue tier 2. Primal Scrabbler Grain, blue tier 2. Primal Blisterlord Bulb, blue tier 3. Vivid Thornweaver Seed. This is a yellow tier 1 seed. Vivid Nestback Grain. This is a yellow tier 2. Vivid Vulture Bulb, yellow tier 3. And the Vivid Aberrash Bulb. I don't know how to say this word. Aberrash. You'll understand. You'll see it on screen. Yellow tier 3. Wild Chieftain Grain. This is a purple tier 2. On the purple specifically, there is not really a tier 1 that is really worthwhile. Wild Spikeback Grain. Purple tier 2. Wild Bristle Matron Bulb. Patron tier 3. Wild Thornmaw Bulb. Purple tier 3. Wild Bramblebug Bulb. Purple tier 3. Keep in mind, this one is extremely expensive. So, if you see a Bramblebug Bulb, pick it up. You'll probably want to sell it. Wild Infestation Queen Bulb. Also a purple tier 3. As you probably just realized, most of the purple tier 3s are worth a ton. So if you get a purple tier 3, make sure you check the name and check the prices on the trading website, because they're really expensive. Secondly, I will provide a spreadsheet on the right, which of course will also be linked in the description down below, as well as the information from the previous list that I provided, that will show you the list of influence-specific mods that you can 100% guarantee using the harvest crafting method, starting specific eye levels with the correct basis. The way this one works is that it shows the affix you can guarantee on the left. The second column will show you the minimum item level requirement to roll the specific mod. The third column will tell you what specific item type the base needs to have. The last column will tell you which crafting seed you need in order to guarantee the outcome. Note here that it is not necessary to have an augment, aka Exalt craft, in order to get these. It's enough to simply use one of the Reforge with guaranteed X-type mod crafts at the specified level with the correct base in order to guarantee the outcome mentioned in the first column. This spreadsheet was not compiled by me, so it might contain a few errors, but from my personal testing and research, it seems very accurate so far. This table was created by a Reddit user with the name of The Senosen Man. I probably just butcher his name here, but you get the idea, who of course will also be credited in the screen and the spreadsheet itself. I have requested permission, and he was kind enough to allow me to re-host his table in my spreadsheet. Thank you for that. Thank you for providing such a valuable asset to the community as a whole. He will also be releasing a more advanced spreadsheet later down the line, is what he said. I'll try to update you guys on that as well, potentially in the next episode, but I'm not 100% certain when he will be intending to release that. There are a ton of different things that I would like to cover, as the harvest crafting system is incredibly complex and the most powerful individual mechanic we've ever had access to. But unfortunately my time is limited, and so is yours. As a result, I'll simply point you in the direction of further information or ideas to pursue with a short list of things for now. Check out the subreddit for crafting guides on specifically Tailwind boots. The entire process is described in multiple threads there. Similarly, you can find guaranteed ways to get yourself an explosion chest piece as well in many of those threads. Try crafting a few cluster jewels, especially small ones, with this mechanic. It leads to really easy currency gains, as there are such few mods that you actually have to hit that it's pretty easy to target and recraft the ones you don't think are amazing. Especially energy shield and life bases are fairly popular for this, for obvious reasons. Try looking for items to recraft and flip for profit. Simply search for an item that already is nearly finished but has one or two bad rolls on it. Then use one of your own harvest crafts to recraft them and make a large profit. Especially jewelry here is very popular, such as high-res but low-life jewelry, which can easily be recrafted into the hundreds of chaos area with a simple remove and add life craft. Lastly, I'll list a few other Path of Exile content creators that have already released or are planning to cover in-depth harvest crafting videos for you to check out down in the description. One of those will be Tenki, who also provided the pictures of the wand that I mentioned earlier during this segment. Thank you for that, Ten. I really appreciate that. Go check him out. This concludes the extremely long strategy discussion segment of today's episode. I hope this, what I have just mentioned, Jesus, made some sense to you and furthered your understanding of the league's mechanic, as well as the potential that it holds. If you would like to see more information about harvest crafting in the next episode as well, such as exact examples of an entire crafting process, or similar stuff, please let me know in the comments down below. The discussion segment is specifically there for me to provide you with the information that you request and require, so don't be shy about asking for specific discussions in the comments. It helps me out. Now, moving on, the weekly Delve update has returned. As predicted, the popularity of Delve in general has vastly declined, as can be seen by the Sulfite Scarab prices, which are at a pretty much all-time low. That, however, is not a bad thing for us, as that simply means fossils have a drastically lowered supply. And a drastically lowered supply, I mean, you know what that means. You've watched this series for a while, you know what that means. With the demand for specific fossils also rising, we got ourselves a nice recipe for some quick and easy currency gains. Here's the rundown. Some fossils are extremely popular in this league due to their ability to craft things that are either A, not possible with harvest crafting, such as mini modifiers, or B, craft bases that can then be used for further harvest crafting themselves. Those fossils would be the corroded, enchanted, sanctified, perfect, shuddering, gilded, and bound fossils, in that order of worth per fossil. As a result of this ranking, my recommendation would be to farm the petrified forest first and the fungal cavern second. The forest will provide you with a large amount of bound and corroded fossils to sell, and, the occasional sanctified one as well, of course. The fungal caverns, on the other hand, will provide perfect and corroded, with the gilded being the occasional drop. Personally, I'm a bit more partial to the petrified forest, as their drop rate of bound and corroded fossils are higher, due to the smaller pool. In the fungal caverns, you oftentimes end up getting dense or the ridiculously abundant aberrant fossil spires, which will likely impact your overall currency per hour. The current prices for this week's top fossils are as follows. Corroded fossils are going for about 19 chaos each. Enchanted and sanctified fossils are sitting at around 13 chaos. Perfect fossils are sitting at around 12. Shuddering fossils have found themselves at a solid 11, and gilded as well as bound fossils are currently sitting at just below the double digits at 9 chaos each. The rest of the fossils are somewhere below the 3 chaos mark, so they're only really worthwhile to farm and sell in very large bulks. However, especially as the supply for fossils is extremely low this league, remember to mark up your bulk sales. Even just 4 to 5 fossils at once can net you a huge up price of about 1 to 3 chaos per fossil, depending on the fossil type. Example, I recently sold 5 times perfect fossils, which were sitting at around 11 chaos at the time, for 70 chaos, which is closer to 13 to 14 chaos each instead. simply as I was providing a bulk that nobody else, or only a few others, were selling. Now with that, happy fossil hunting and good luck on your delves. Lastly, we'll be getting into our rapid fire tips and tricks section as per usual. You'll recognize some of these from the previous episode, but they're more important now than ever, come the second week as more and more casual players reach the mapping state and start to advance in Atlas, so I figured I'd repeat some of them here just to remind you of them. Firstly, flip maps from Zana's shop. As with last league, this is still an incredibly lucrative option, especially at higher tier maps. You only have to open the Zana map inside of the map you're running to reset the shop. You do not need to enter it, nor do you need to complete your mission. This makes it extremely easy to cycle through a shop in quick succession, using yellow or even white master missions on maps. Maps from tier 6 to tier 14 are usually all worth flipping in this manner, netting a ton of easy profit per map on average in this fashion. You can flip through a few dozen maps in a matter of minutes with the low map drop rate reported by many players. They'll be happy to know that you are now supplying them with extra through your premium stash tabs for the low price of a few chaos. Cluster jewel crafting. As with the Leader League, you can make an absolute ton of currency by identifying where cluster jewel nodes are used by players and which ones are in low supply. This was by far the most lucrative crafting option last league and will likely continue to be for this league as well. Also keep my previous tip in mind to use the harvest crafting on them, especially the reforged ones that you have no other use for because it's essentially chaos spamming, are very worthwhile to use with different cluster jewel bases. Simply buy a few of the most popular types and keep spamming your least valuable crafts into them and you'll make an absolute fortune, trust me. However, do wait for the announced patch that makes large and medium cluster jewels better, as otherwise nobody will buy your stuff. You're good to go with small cluster jewels immediately, however, as they are not intended to be touched by the patch. And with those last two tips wrapped up, I'll be ending this extremely long chaos report. I hope this video was informative and you learned something from it that you can apply to your own game. Please let me know if I missed anything, or you would have wanted me to talk about anything specific that I might not have covered or not covered deeply enough. If you want to support the creation of these videos, feel free to check out my Patreon and maybe consider signing up for it. You can find a link to it in the description down below, and your support is highly appreciated. Please remember to leave feedback on the video, it really helps me out a lot. I also read all of your comments, so don't be afraid if I don't answer, I've seen it. You can find a link to my Twitter and Discord down below in the description as well. And of course, as always, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell thingy, like or dislike the video, and check me out over on twitch.tv/Lungwolf. I stream pretty much every day, and I'm slowly improving my perforate build at the moment. If you need background noise, I'll gladly be yours. And if you're interested in my perforate build, I have a guide on my YouTube channel, so check it out. You can find a link to the stream in the description down below. And with that, thanks for watching, and keep farming those exalts.